Hi, everybody. I really appreciate being asked to be here today. I always appreciate the chance to get out there and talk about new ways to help first responder therapy clients navigate through various experiences in their lives. So I do appreciate the opportunity to be here. So thanks very much for having me. Throughout a few points during the presentation, I'm going to be using some interactive Slidos, assuming that I did it correctly and it comes up on your screen correctly. If I did it correctly, what you'll see is a QR code pop up from time to time. You can just take your handy dandy cell phone and just scan that with your camera. It'll give you a little link to participate in the Slido survey. So I really appreciate your participation. If you don't mind doing that, I think it will help really inform the presentation as to people's experiences, et cetera. So if you do see that pop up, just scan that QR code. You'll hit a little link, and you'll be able to participate in the in the survey or the interactive piece. So thanks very much for doing that. Not for the purpose of going through my CV. That's not the purpose. But I just want to let you know a little bit of where I'm coming from. So what kind of experiences are informing myself in my work with first responders and law enforcement. So I'm a clinical psychologist in independent practice. I run a private practice, and 85% of that work is psychotherapy near exclusively with first responders and almost near exclusively with law enforcement. I also see some correction officers, deputy sheriffs, federal agents, fire service personnel, emergency service personnel, 911 dispatchers, et cetera, et cetera. But the vast majority of my clients are law enforcement, either active or retired. I myself am former law enforcement. I retired from the NYPD in 2018 after 21 years there. And then I was a few years with other agencies prior to, but retired as a second grade detective in 2018 and got my doctorate along the way. And here I am. The rest is history. I'll bore you with the details if you ever want some time in person. Past visiting law enforcement fellow with the IACP, a fellow of the American Psychological Association, the current chair-elect of the Police and Public Safety section of APA Division 18, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Again, I put it up there just so that you get a sort of a quick snapshot of my background and where I'm coming from when I'm talking about my approach to working with psychotherapy with law enforcement. And so I'd love to get sort of a snapshot of who's all in the audience. Sometimes it helps me bring up or not bring up certain points. So if you do see the Slido up there, if you wouldn't mind just taking a scan of that QR code and just replying to that, it helps me sort of get a sense overall of who's in the audience, because it's helpful to know if I'm speaking to other clinicians, if I'm speaking to law enforcement, other first responders, whatever it might be. And so we'll see some of the results are coming up in there. And so, I'll be speaking today about an approach that I have developed in regard to psychotherapy with first responders and with law enforcement. It's an approach that has developed over the past, say, 6 years, but it's also informed by things that I've been passionate about for 20, 25 years, decades and decades. And so when I opened up my private practice, I really wanted to find ways to engage in a culturally competent way with my clients. And so I kind of went back into my Rolodex of things I was passionate about from years before, and pulled some things out of there, and really use it to develop a particular approach to psychotherapy with my law enforcement clients. And that's what I'm going to share with you today, but not only share with you the approach to psychotherapy, but share with you a way of thinking about your own experiences, thinking about the adversity in your own life, thinking about times when you have tried to engage in positive behavioral change, long-lasting positive behavior change, when you're dealing with adverse life events, the death of a loved one, loss of a job, whatever it might be. And also times when really you just felt a need to kind of seek out personal transformation on your own for whatever reason that may be. And so, yes, it's an approach that I use in psychotherapy, but it's something that you can take on yourself and say, let me think about my life in these ways, and let me think about how I can restore my own experiences in order to best weather adversity, transform myself, enact positive behavioral change, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what I'll be speaking about a bit today. So it looks like most of the room is law enforcement, police and sheriff. with clinicians, other law enforcement. So I'm assuming things along the line of possibly correction officers or federal workforce, whatever it might be. And so thanks very much for responding. Now we all kind of get a better snapshot of who's here today. And thanks very much for being here today. So, I've developed this approach to working with my law enforcement clients in seeking a way to help them restory the narratives that they tell themselves about themselves and their lives and the world and other people. The truth is that we live in a reality that we construct for ourselves, right? And I'm not talking about this kind of matrix sort of thing. I'm saying that the story that we tell ourselves and about the world and about other people is a narrative that we construct on our own. And not everything in that narrative is factually correct. We do live in a reality or perception that we create for ourselves. Our perception is our reality, but sometimes our perception is built on falsehoods and things that we tell ourselves that are not entirely true. Things we tell ourselves about ourselves that are not necessarily completely true. Things we tell ourselves about the world, about others, about experiences in our lives and the things that we have learned or potentially not learned from them. And so this approach that I take is not a treatment in and of itself. It is a frame. It is an approach, a frame upon which almost any treatment modality can be built. So myself, I'm a psychodynamic a therapist. Was trained primarily object relational, but since my training, I've really gone on to be really focused on analytical psychology and Jungian theory and things of that nature. And so I am a depth psychologist, which means I acknowledge the existence of the unconscious and the role that the unconscious plays in guiding our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors and helping my clients access those sort of deeper levels of understandings of themselves that they might be otherwise ignoring. And so that is my background, depth psychology, psychodynamic work. However, if you're a CBT therapist or you do DBT or whatever it is you do, whatever initials your particular therapy is, you can take that, put it right up on the frame of the approach that I use. And so for the clinicians in the room, thinking about the clinical work that you do with your clients, think about what could you do? How could you take the skills that you use, the therapy that you do, and build it upon this frame? And for the law enforcement and others in the room, thinking about how can you take this way of restoring the narratives that we tell ourselves, of reconstructing the narratives that we tell ourselves, and really exposing those lies in which we live sometimes, or those misperceptions which form our reality, which form our narrative, and how can we restory and reconstruct that narrative in regard to how we enact positive behavioral change, how we recover from trauma and adverse events, how we can personally transform and simply be better versions of ourselves. And that is really what I hope to do for my clients and as well for you today. Primary sources, and I'm not going to spend much time on this, but just so you know, so Carl Jung and Joseph Campbell are kind of the primary sources of some of the background. Now, not from a psychological or a psychotherapy theoretical underpinning. That's really more on narrative reconstruction and identity theory and the trans-theoretical model of change, et cetera, et cetera. But looking at the background of where some of the concepts come from, they come from both a psychiatrist and analyst by the name of Carl Jung and a comparative mythologist by the name of Joseph Campbell. And yes, for those who might already be familiar with both men, yes, both of them have criticisms that we can throw stones at their careers and their persons all day, right? But I look at their work through a historicist lens, meaning I'm able to separate the theorist from the theory. Because if we sat around all day and just focused on throwing rocks at their misogyny and their sexism and potentially their racism and potentially even their anti-Semitism, which is some criticisms that have been made about Jung, we kind of lose the theory for the theorist, right? And so Carl Jung was a Swiss psychiatrist. He was less of a student and more a contemporary of Freud's. They parted ways in 1913 after a number of disagreements. And his work on what's called the transpersonal unconscious, or sometimes referred to as the collective unconscious, is part of what caused that divide and part of what really separates him from other theorists of his time. And then Joseph Campbell was his comparative mythologist. He taught for 38 years in English literature and medieval literature at Sarah Lawrence College. And based on those lectures over those 38 years, he wrote a book called The Hero with a Thousand Faces, which speaks about this idea of the monomyth, this universal story that we all tell in every culture that there is to have stories to tell. And there are similar stories universally that we have told since the beginning of time, because those stories are not about myths and legends and these other folks. Those stories are about us, right? And so we tell these stories because we relate to these stories and the characters in these stories. And our lives are stories, stories we tell ourselves and about the world and about other people and about our experiences. And how can we use contributions from both Jung and Campbell in a way to help us restory our own narrative, to reconstruct our own understanding of the world and self and others. And so I'll be using the word hero from time to time. When I use the word hero in a Jungian sense, it means something very different from when I use it in a Campbellian sense. But essentially, the hero in regard to Jungian theory is this aspect of ourselves that exists in the ether of the transpersonal unconscious, which is basically our inherent drive to grow and to overcome and to build upon adversity and to overcome adversity in our lives and to move into what he would call individuation, to become our best selves. That is what he means by the hero. When Campbell uses the word hero, he's talking about this figure from this primordial, timeless stories that is told universally across cultures and religions and belief systems and follows sort of a typical cycle of events. So we'll be combining both of these concepts of hero into really understanding ourselves and restoring the narrative that we tell ourselves about ourselves. So the hero as protagonist, right? We are the protagonist of our own story. Sometimes we are the self-identified hero in our own story. Sometimes we are the self-identified villain in our own story. And sometimes those stories that we tell ourselves are based on factual information, and sometimes based on less than factual information. This concept of hero as protagonist, this Campbellian hero, this hero of the monomyth, is a figure from timeless primordial stories that we can go all the way back in time and see the same hero, the same figure appearing and reappearing in the myths and legends and cultural stories and folklore and religions throughout time. The same sort of character and story appears and reappears because that story is not about that character. That story is about us. It is about an aspect of ourselves that is constantly seeking to grow, to overcome, to adapt to adversity, to become the best version of ourselves that we possibly can, to shed the lies we tell about ourselves and become the truth about ourselves, to what Jung would call individuating, to becoming the best version of ourselves that we can be, a version of ourselves that is free from lies and misperceptions about ourselves and the world and others. This character follows a universal template. We're going to go through the cycle of that universal template on a further slide. Understand that when Campbell is using the word hero, he is not talking about this altruistic do-gooder. He's not talking about the Captain Americas of the world. He's not talking about Superman. The hero is flawed. The hero is an imperfect messenger who has some of the worst qualities of humanity within them, as do we all, right? The hero, the way Campbell uses it, is not meant to be seen as this Dudley Do-Right sort of altruistic do-gooder who's constantly sacrificing himself for the greater good, et cetera, et cetera. The hero is probably not even likable, to tell you the truth, right? This is not, throw away that concept that the hero is this ultimate paradigm of virtuousness, right? No, the Campbellian hero is the exact opposite. These are flawed people. Like I said, possibly not even likable people. These are not self-sacrificing people. These are not altruistic do-gooders. These are people faced with adversity, faced with a struggle, and forced into situations where they have to overcome particular struggles, particular adversities, particular challenges, particular traumas that have been faced before them. So the hero in the Campbellian sense, the hero of the monomyth, us, the hero of the monomyth is this person faced with struggle, faced with adversity, faced with challenge, and forced to either decide to go through that challenge or run away from it and decide to be a lesser version of ourselves, or to go through that challenge and become a better version of ourselves. I tell my clients all the time, especially clients that are facing particular adversity or particular traumas in their life, I tell them all the time when they say to me, how will I ever get over this? I tell them all the time, you won't get over this. You're not supposed to get over this. You're supposed to go through this. So we are not going to get over it. We are going to go straight through it. That's what we're going to do. The only way through trauma is through, not by getting over it, by going through it. And that's what the Campbellian hero is tasked with doing, going through the trauma head on, taking it head on, learning the skills, developing the skills to overcome the adversity in their lives and come out the other side transformed as this better version of themselves. You don't get over it. You go through it, right? And I tell them we're going to get through it together to a point, and then you are going to take it and get through it on your own. We're not going to get over it. We're going to go through it, right? The hero grows through adversity, overcomes challenges, overcomes struggles, and becomes this better version of themselves and returns with something to share with the rest of the community, something to share and give back to others to help them become better versions of themselves as well. It is a transformational journey, but it is our transformational journey. We are the hero, not the hero of myths and legends and folklore. We are the hero. We are the protagonist in this timeless primordial story that's told universally. The story we tell ourselves, though, is a construction. We construct the narrative of our lives that we tell ourselves. What I work to do with my clients is to reconstruct the narrative that they tell themselves, identify the lies in the stories they tell themselves about themselves and the misperceptions, and restory their own narratives so that they understand the world and themselves and others differently. It's a quote from Tedeschi and Calhoun of post-traumatic growth fame, right? So Tedeschi and Calhoun, going back to 95, this is their book from 95, Trauma and Transformation, I believe it was called. Tedeschi and Calhoun sort of coined this concept of post-traumatic growth, the idea that adversity is not only a bad thing. It's a bad thing, but it's not only a bad thing, right? Tedeschi and Calhoun have this idea that trauma, adversity, crisis, struggle, pain, and discomfort are opportunities. They are opportunities to grow. There are opportunities to go through the adversity, through the trauma, and come out stronger or different, transformed and stronger, different in a wiser sort of way than we went into it. But trauma and adversity and conflict and struggle and pain and discomfort don't only have to be things that hurt us. The hurt is temporary, the growth is permanent, if we choose for it to be so. Because trauma is not a choice, but growth is, right? Trauma is going to happen. Adversity is going to happen. The question is, do I allow the choice for it to be something that I grow from, or something that only can cause me pain and discomfort and harm, et cetera, et cetera? The hero is on the brink of the abyss. And this is from Tedeschi and Calhoun, not from Jung or from Campbell. So this is Tedeschi and Calhoun channeling this concept of the hero, us as hero of our own stories. On the brink of the abyss, what is unknown and incomprehensible, and this is the situation confronted by those facing crises. When such crises occur, we are given the opportunity and forced to confront the most threatening question that are always there, but hidden. But hidden. This is Jungian, as Jungian can be. The concept of this shadow self, the concept of things about ourselves that we fail to acknowledge, both good and bad, and we tuck away and keep out of sight. Those things must be confronted. We must go through it. Right now, the hero's journey has been applied in many different ways, many different contexts, including clinically. There are many, many clinical examples of where the hero's journey is being applied for clinical purposes. I've conducted an extensive literature review on that. I'd be happy to speak about that at length, but it is well beyond the scope of what we're talking about today. But understand that this concept of the hero's journey has been applied clinically in many different ways. It's also been applied in story writings. A fellow by the name of Christopher Vogler, he took the hero's journey and changed it into something he calls the writer's journey. And the writer's journey is about using the hero's journey as a template for successful storytelling, right? So if you look at many of the stories that we watch, they follow the hero's journey formulaic approach to storytelling. So for example, let's take Luke Skywalker. Let's take Luke Skywalker when he's on the planet Dagobah and he's training with Yoda and he's looking at that cave. He sees that cave and he says, what is in that cave? And what does Yoda tell him is in that cave? Only what you take with you, right? That cave is what he has to go through to become who he will be. And the only things he brings into that shadowy cave are the only thing in there are the things he brings with them, his own fears, his own insecurities, his own limitations. But we have to go through that cave to become this transformed version of ourselves. It's the very same concept, right? We are the hero, and we must ask those questions of ourselves that we have been avoiding for a very long time, right? But we have to ask those questions in order to get those answers that transform us into a different version of ourselves. So think back to a time when you encountered a significant adversity in your life, a significant crisis in your life, an adversity, a trauma, a crisis that forced you to go through it or run from it, right? The choice was yours. What one word, and you can enter multiple one words, but what one word would describe that adversity before going into it? How did you see it? How did it appear to you when you thought about taking it on? When you thought about encountering, when you thought about going through it and not getting over it and not running from it, what occurred to you? What is the one word that you would say, this is what I felt? Because when we are facing adversity, when we're facing trauma, when we're facing crisis, we are all experiencing nearly the same reaction to it, right? Paralyzing, that is a great one, right? Because what do? We freeze, right? We have a number of ways that we react to threats, right? We fight, we flight, we sometimes freeze, right? And yes, when we're thinking about taking that on, we have to look back, we have to look within, and do an honest inventory of ourselves and our internal resources and our strengths. And we have to really ask ourselves, do I have what it takes to go through this trauma, to go through this adversity, through this conflict, this struggle? Because there is no getting over it. There is only going through it. And we're thinking about that and we're saying to ourselves, I can't do this. I'm too paralyzed. I'm too overwhelmed. Often, that thing we're telling about ourselves is a lie. It is a misperception. It is a misunderstanding of our own strengths and our own abilities. It is a misunderstanding of how impossible these odds really are. If it's something someone else has done, there's a good chance you can do it. If it's something that someone else has gotten through, it's a good chance you can get through it too. But we have to reevaluate the story that we tell ourselves about ourselves and about our ability to face overwhelming odds and to take on the fear and the despair and the terror and the hopelessness, right? These are all fantastic words, and these are all words that my clients have used to describe the challenges that they're up against when we're working on helping them navigate through the various traumas or crises or adversities. So thank you very much for sharing those. As we are later on the future slide, as we're going through the cycle, talking about the cycle of the hero, we're talking about the cycle of ourselves when facing adversity. Ask yourselves, we're going to get to a certain point in the cycle, and we're talking about having to cross into the unknown, having to take that thing on. How did you get past these? How did you get past the fear? How did you get past the paralyzation? How did you get past the belief that things were just too difficult to be able to do? What got you through it? Who got you through it? How did you muster the strength? And ultimately, the question we'll ask is, what did you learn from it, right? So back to Tedeschi and Calhoun's concept of post-traumatic growth. I prefer the term adversarial growth, and I'll tell you why I prefer that term. if you, as you read Tedeschi and Calhoun, or Tedeschi and Calhoun and Park, which is one of the future, one of the further books in facilitating post-traumatic growth, which is really a handbook for clinicians primarily. As you read through any of their post-traumatic works, you'll find that they use the word trauma interchangeably with around 20 or 30 other words. So they'll say life adversity, life struggle, crisis, difficult life events. They'll use all of these terms and words interchangeably with the word trauma. I think the word trauma is sometimes misleading. I think sometimes we hear the word trauma and we believe it has to be this major life event, this life altering event, this thing that has devastated me. Not necessarily, right? Trauma doesn't have to be a critical incident. It doesn't have to be a shooting. It doesn't have to be a combat experience. Trauma, adversity, conflict, struggle, adverse life events, difficult life crises, all these words that Tedeschi and Calhoun use interchangeably for trauma. It can be a small t trauma. It doesn't have to be a capital T trauma, which is why I prefer to use the word adversity, because I think we can all say, sure, I've been through adversity. But if I were to say to you, have you been through trauma? You might go, I don't know if I necessarily consider it trauma, right? But it's adversity, it's conflict, it's struggle. It's a transformational life event which made you a different person than you were before you encountered it, right? So this concept is repeated time and time again in different authors. So here we have Wilson from one of his articles talking about, so post-traumatic growth grew from a school of thought called positive psychology, which is about making use of the study of human behavior to help people live the best possible lives that they can, to focus on people's strengths, not people's weaknesses, to focus on what people can achieve, not what people can fail at, right? And so positive psychology, the theory of post-traumatic growth, grows out of this whole concept. And Wilson says a positive psychology regarding PTSD seeks to understand how persons create meaning. The stories we tell ourselves create meaning, meaning making. Jung wrote quite a bit about meaning making. So did Viktor Frankl. If you're familiar with Viktor Frankl, Holocaust survivor, who wrote this amazing book about how he got through that trauma and how he didn't allow it to be something that would destroy him, but rather something that would make him a better version of himself. The stories we tell ourselves, making meaning of life events, including the worst life events we could possibly face, create meaning and spring back from losses and the most horrible events that humankind can inflict on the spirit, the striving towards unity, integration, and the will to thrive with dignity. So just quickly, just a comment about Jung and analytic psychology and Jungian thinking and what sort of informs my thinking. We look at three major psychodynamic theorists who kind of form the three-legged stool of psychodynamics, which is Freud, Adler, and Jung. Freud wrote primarily about sexuality and the role of sexuality. Adler wrote primarily about the role of the social person. Jung saw problems about the soul, about the spirit. So where Freud wrote about sexuality, Adler wrote about the social world, Jung wrote about the spirit, about the soul, that so many things are a disorder of the soul, of the spirit. And so that was sort of his approach to things, about helping people heal their soul, heal their spirit in the aftermath. The adversity you were thinking about, the difficult thing that was on your mind, the thing that paralyzed you, the thing that you were afraid of, the thing that you were too afraid to confront, that you found too scary, the thing that was overwhelming, after you'd been through it, after it was over and done and wrapped up, or maybe it's not, maybe still you're working your way through it, right? How did you grow from that adversity, from that struggle, from that trauma, from that crisis? When you were through the other end of it, how did you grow from it? Because these are the 5 ways that Tedeschi and Calhoun suggest that we can grow from adversity. And I think many of us can relate to perhaps all of these at some point. They say there are no atheists in foxholes, for example, right? That you can, this is sort of an expression that people say you can deny God all you want, but when it hits the fan, you find yourself saying a little prayer to get through it, right? That idea of there are no atheists in foxholes, the idea that being entrenched, for lack of a better term, pardon the pun, being entrenched in conflict and warfare and adversity does give us the opportunity to think about or rediscover or reaffirm our own spirituality and our own religion. If so, not for everybody. Some people come out of adversity and trauma saying, I had no idea I was strong enough to get through that. Yet here I am, and now a new appreciation for your own strengths, right? We use this often to restore our narratives that we tell ourselves about ourselves, becoming more appreciative of others and their relationships. I have heard so many clients tell me, you know what, I never thought? I never thought that when I was going through this struggle, there was some people that I never imagined would not be there for me. And there are people who were there for me that I never would have predicted would have been there for me, right? Developing deeper appreciations for relationships, for the way that we rely on other people, for what our relationships mean to us, right? Finding new opportunities in the aftermath of trauma. Now, that's not saying be an opportunist and monetize people's pain, things like that. It's saying, for example, the mother of Emmett Till. After Emmett Till was murdered, his mother went on to become a teacher and a prolific civil rights activist, became very involved with the NAACP, and is known as an amazing person in the world of civil rights. She took the death of her son, she took the death of Emmett Till, and turned it into an opportunity to be a beacon for the world. We look at John Walsh, who lost his son Adam Walsh in an abduction and went on to create America's Most Wanted, which then went to yield, the bringing in of various criminals around the world, bringing to the arrest of some of the worst out there. They took their tragedy and they saw an opportunity in it. They saw a way to take their trauma, take their adversity, take their struggle, and build something positive from it. And that's how they made meaning of the trauma, right? My son will not have died in vain, etc. Right? So how have you grown from the traumas that you've been through? And that's really the whole point of post-traumatic growth, the whole point of making meaning of suffering, right? Making meaning of conflict and of adversity and of trauma. So what is the hero's journey? What is this monomyth all about? Well, Joseph Campbell is a comparative mythologist. He read all the mythologies of all the world, and not just, the kind of ones that you might think about, but really obscure sort of belief systems and the folklore and the tales and the stories of the entire world throughout time. And he was an expert on all these stories and all these tales. And he came over time to say, they're all the same story. All of these stories that we tell ourselves, they're all the same story. Different cultural changes here and there, different names, changing the scenery, taking, what is it? Taking old bottles and pouring new wine into it, something along those lines. He said that was the idea. It's all the same template. It's all the same story being told and retold for thousands and thousands of years with the same hero, us, the same protagonist in the story. And it goes something like this. The hero is called upon to face some daunting challenge in their life. They descend into these depths of some abyss. They encounter supernatural foes and forces in this unknown world, in this surreal landscape. They gain whatever the elixir is, the boon. They return, transform to society, and they bring back this elixir, this boon, for the betterment of society. And then he breaks this down into a series of stages that we'll go through in just a minute. But as I go through each stage, because those are the three main stages, but there are many sub-stages beneath it. As I go through each sub-stage and walk you through this cycle, this story, right? Ask yourself, what is my story? What story am I living? What story am I telling myself, about the adversity I face, about the struggles I've faced, about the conflict I've had to endure? What is the story I tell myself about myself? What is the story I am living, right? What was my known world before I encountered this struggle? The before, right? How many times do we say, oh, that was in the pre 9/11 world, right? How many times do we use that kind of language? We talk about the before and the after, how things have sort of fundamentally changed, right? What was your known world before? Who were you before? Who were you after? How did your world change in the aftermath? How were you called upon this adventure? How were you called to take action in this specific way? Who was your supernatural aid, right? Again, as we go through the cycles, ask yourself these questions. What was your threshold guardian? What was your road of trials? What was your temptation? How did you overcome it? Et cetera, et cetera. Keep in mind all these questions as we talked about these sub-stages, right? So again, the primary major stages: separation or departure, initiation, and then return or transformation. So the hero, you, the protagonist of your own story, is called to action in some way, called to adventure. This happens in many different ways. It can be forced upon you. I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask for this trauma, right? But yet here I am, right? You can take it on willingly. You can say, here's a challenge I am going to take on intentionally, right? You can simply be in the wrong place at the wrong time, or the right place at the wrong time, whatever it might be. So how was this demand, this crisis, this struggle? How did you come to be called to action, to be called to adventure? Sometimes the hero, and every hero does not pass through every single substage, and it's not linear. Sometimes there's step backs and regressions and things of that nature, just like there is in psychotherapy when we have relapses and prolapses and all these other kind of regressions that go on in people's lives. Some heroes refuse the call. They say, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not taking on this struggle. Sometimes they go back and they never do it and they never transform. Sometimes they refuse and someone else kind of has to nudge them along. They encounter mentors, supernatural aid, people who come into their lives at the time when the student needs a teacher, people who enter their lives and either teach them the skills that they need or give them some magic sword or something like that to help them take on the battle that they are about to take on. The same way in our lives when we're facing struggle and adversity, sometimes the teacher appears when the student needs them the most and is that source of supernatural aid to guide them through these difficult times. Crossing the first threshold, this is where the threshold guardian is. This is the shadow work. This is where we must confront that cave. We must confront the things that we take into our biggest doubts, our biggest insecurities, are convincing ourselves that we can't do it, that we have limitations, right? This is the three billy goats gruff coming up to the bridge. And there's that ogre underneath the bridge, and they're just not sure that they can cross that bridge, but they have to cross that bridge if they want to get to those greener pastures, right? Sometimes we have an ogre, but where is the ogre? The ogre's in here. The ogre is in here, convincing you that you don't have the strength to do this, convincing you that you're not smart enough, that you're not good enough, that you're not strong enough, whatever it is. That ogre is a lie. That ogre is a lie, and we have to dispel that lie before we can cross that bridge and conquer that threshold guardian. The belly of the whale, not everyone goes through this, right? But it's named after Jonah. Jonah refused God's orders. So God said, okay, get swallowed by this whale and go in there and sort of think about it. And so it's a moment of purification, a moment of meditation, sort of a gestation, a rebirth before the death. Then you cross into this unknown world. This thing is put upon you. You don't know the rules. You don't know the landscape. It's sort of surreal. How many times do my clients say to me, this isn't my life. I never imagined this would be my life. How did I get here? I don't know what to do. I don't know how to get through this. Right. Because you're in the unknown world now. You're in this place where you need to develop these new skills, these new habits, these new ways of living. You go along this road of trials, right? It's Dorothy on the yellow brick road, meeting her allies and facing her greatest fears. Meeting with the goddess, which is really a poor way of putting it. It's really meeting with divinity, becoming this aspect of the divine entering you and kind of helping you become this better person. Woman as temptress, a poorly named stage, but again, Campbell was a misogynist and a sexist. Woman as temptress, this is about facing our biggest temptation, the temptation to turn back. This is Boromir saying to Frodo, give me the ring, Frodo. I will take this from you. I will take this burden from you. You don't need to carry this anymore. Give into the temptation and walk away from this, right? This is facing our biggest temptation during this struggle, during this adversity. Atonement to Father is about facing those things that most limit my success, most limit my ability to become who I need to be. The ordeal, this is sort of the big conflict. The ultimate boon in the ordeal, typically the hero dies symbolically, returns transformed. This is Gandalf the Grey returning as Gandalf the White, transformed because he dies when he fights the Balrog and the whole thing. Returns with the ultimate boon with this new secret, this elixir, returns to the known world, and now is able to share this newfound knowledge, this newfound wisdom with others, and help others transform themselves and become better versions of themselves, and then go on to exist as a master of two worlds, understanding both the world of the traumatized and the world of the transformed, right? And able to teach other people how to move through it. There's the old story, right? What's the old story? And you could tell this 100 different ways. A cop falls in a hole and the cop can't get out of the hole. It's just too big. He doesn't know the way out. And so a priest walks by. The priest says, "Hey, get out of that hole." The cop says, "I don't know the way out." And the priest says, "Don't worry, I'll say a prayer from you," and walks away. The cop says, "Okay." A lieutenant walks by. Lieutenant says, "I order you to get out of that hole." And the cop says, "I can't get out of the hole." And the lieutenant says, "Well, I order you to," and walks away. The cop's still in the hole. Another cop walks by and says, "Hey, what are you doing in that hole?" And the other cop jumps in the hole with him. And the cop says, "What'd you do that for? Now we're both in this hole." And the cop says, "Yeah, it's fine. I've been here before. I know the way out." Right? That is the return with the elixir. That is the return with the boon to share it with all of community and to help other people become better versions of themselves, which is what I seek to do in helping people to restory the narratives they tell themselves about themselves. So again, just kind of breaking up those stages here in a more linear way. The departure, the separation, the call to action, having a trauma put upon you, criterion A, the triggering event, the inciting incident, the criterion event, having a trauma or a struggle or adversity put on you that perhaps you didn't ask, or maybe taking on a quest that you did ask for, a new challenge, possibly refusing it, finding your mentors, moving through that shadow, taking what you take into that cave and facing your insecurities, facing the lies you tell yourself about yourself and the world, etc., possibly having to gestate for a while in the belly of the whale, going along that road of trials, right? Meeting with divinity, finding that divine spark that you need. Again, Jung wrote quite a bit about the soul and the spirit, very much in keeping with Campbell, and this piece about we must encounter the numinous in order to transform. We must become one with the numinous. We must encounter the divine in order to truly transform, facing our temptations, defeating those things which most limit us, taking on the final battle, and gaining the elixir, the golden fleece, whatever it might be, to bring it back, returning to the world and sharing our boon with others. It is not enough to transform. One must transform and then share to truly become the best version of oneself. It's not enough to gain the elixir if you keep it to yourself. It's not enough to gain the wisdom if all you do is retain it. You have to share it to truly become the hero transformed, right? That in Vogler's writer's journey, Campbell's hero's journey differs in one way. Vogler's writer's journey leads to some climactic event, some final boss that you have to fight. The writer's journey suggests that the point of the journey is that final fight. The hero's journey says, no, 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 you're missing the point. The point of the journey is not this final battle. The point of the journey is the transformation and the sharing of that transformation with others. So the hero's journey has nothing to do with this final battle, right? It's about the transformation, the return, the rebirth from one's symbolic death, and the transformational return and the sharing of that new wisdom with others. That's what truly defines the hero, the sharing, not the struggle, or not the claiming, right? To quote from Sherman in his book Rejection, you can't go back and make a new start, but you can start right now and make a brand new ending. Right? We cannot change the trauma that's happened to us. We cannot change the adversity we faced. We cannot change the bad things that life brings because life brings bad things. We can't go back and change those. What I can do is start right now and decide I want a new ending. And I can restory the narrative I tell myself about myself and see challenge and adversity and trauma in a different light, not as a way that destroys me, but a way that transforms me. And this is what I work with my clients. Not every client is appropriate for this approach. And so it's not an approach I use with every one of my clients. It's just not appropriate for every one of my clients. But for those clients that are seeking to enact positive behavioral change, to stop drinking, to stop whatever vice they might be engaged in, those clients who are seeking to get through trauma and not avoid it, not go around it, but go straight through it. those clients who are just seeking to be better versions of themselves, to transform into better version of themselves. For those clients, I certainly use this approach, this frame. You can take this frame of the hero's journey. You can take this concept of heroic growth, and you can build upon the frame any treatment modality you use. Granted, I'm a psychodynamic therapist. You can take any therapy modality and build it upon this frame, build it upon this structure, and help your clients restory the narrative they tell themselves about themselves to understand challenge and trauma and adversity differently than seeing it simply as something to hurt and cause pain and discomfort. There is no, Jung once said, and I believe this, there is no birth into consciousness without pain, meaning we cannot become self aware without going through pain and discomfort. We must face the pain and discomfort. We must face it head on and go straight through it, not around it, and can't run from it. Not an option. We have to go straight through it. And when we do, there is the opportunity to take our trauma, our adversity, and transform to become Gandalf the White from Gandalf the Gray or whatever other story character you might want to tell yourself about. So, takeaway, adversity, trauma, and crisis, these are all journeys. They're journeys toward growth. Along that way, we can regress, we can run, right? It's always an option. It's always an option to run. It's also always an option to go forward and go straight through it. Transformation is not without discomfort. It is not without pain. Anyone who tells you differently is selling you something, right? The story that we tell ourselves about adversity and about ourselves and about our trauma and about the world and about others, we can rewrite that story. We can restory the narrative we tell ourselves and about our trauma and about our strengths and about the world. It can all be restored, but you have to be willing to go through it. And if you can do that, you can die symbolically in the unknown world and return reborn and transformed as a better version of yourself to share with others, which is the ultimate goal of the hero, not just to transform, but to make the world a better place for others and to help others transform and heal and grow. And with that said, I think I just hit the time mark, which is what I was really aiming for. So really kind of proud of myself there. I was really afraid of hitting that time mark, but here we are, almost right on time. And I will take any questions anyone has.
You did an amazing job, man. That was really fantastic.
Thanks.
And it's funny because your presentation is so intellectual, but yet still so stimulating because it helps, or I think especially all of the folks that have gone through trauma, Tom, help to redefine their story in that they don't have to be a victim of their story. They could be a triumphant successor of that story, of that trauma. And I think it helps the clinicians to also be able to reframe maybe some of the work that they're doing. And I think people have commented on that as well. So I know that you have some comments in the chat, and I know that you have at least one question that I could see inside of the Q&A section as well, two of them. So if you
Mhm.
could spend some time responding to that, Tom, I would really appreciate that.
Sure.
Thank you very much for taking the time to put this presentation so thoughtfully together and for sharing this perspective. I think that hopefully this will be a platform where you'll keep pushing this out and getting this word spread even more, and if we could help to promote that too, please, anything that we could do, we'll try.
Well, thanks very much for having me. Did you want me to address those questions now or in the chat?
Yeah, we have a couple minutes right now. If you want to address at least some of the comments, any questions, if you can,
Sure.
by all means, please
Yeah,
do.
absolutely. So I'm looking at one here, and maybe I might not be in the right place in the chat, but I'm looking at one here. How do you deal with the guilt of not transforming as quickly or as wholly as you think that you should? Sure. So clients will sometimes refuse the call, right? They will decide they're not strong enough, they're not good enough, they're not smart enough, they don't have what it takes to overcome this pain. There's no way I can go on with this. And that is hopelessness and helplessness, right? That is what we see in suicidal ideation, right? Nothing will ever get better. I am powerless to change it. I'm in unbearable emotional pain, right? When I see somebody facing that degree of helplessness and then the guilt associated with, I do not believe I have the courage to do this, we take that guilt and we use it as grist for the mill, and we truly try to use that guilt as shadow, right? Guilt in Jungian terms and in analytic psychology, guilt is shadow. right? Guilt is a story I tell myself that is some, well, that's not always. Sometimes guilt is an actual thing, but sometimes it is untrue, right? The guilt of not believing I am strong enough to do something, that is often just untrue. The fact that I have not done it yet, and that goes back to that Sherman quote, I cannot change what has already happened, but I can start today and rewrite a new ending, right? That is an idea of, okay, what has happened has happened. We're going to wrap that up as part and parcel with the trauma. And we are going to decide we're going to make a dedicated effort today to restore that. And we're going to make a dedicated effort to take that cave on, take that threshold guardian on head on. And we're going to have honest conversations about my insecurities, about my fears, about what's limited me. And we're going to look into that narrative and see how much of that is true and untrue. But we take guilt and we take it head on. We say, well, let's go right into that, right? And it's going to hurt, but let's do it. And guilt is something that we could take head on. We can restore it when appropriate, right? Or we can own it when it's a true element of our story, right? Sometimes part of our story is just the guilt is mine to own. I will take that guilt and I will use it as a way to transform, as a way to convince myself that the only path forward is forward, right? Because I have to do something different than I've done before. The way I've been living my life up to now apparently has not worked. So I need to be willing to make that positive behavioral change, whatever that might be. If it means stop drinking or whatever it might be, right? Having to make that positive behavioral change. And so we take guilt and we use it as gasoline on the fire along the journey, right? We use that to fire us up. Um, uh,
So it's not that any one emotion is a negative emotion. It could be a
yeah,
transformative emotion, no matter
sure.
what the word is, right?
Yeah, there's no such thing as a good or a bad feeling.
Right,
There's no such thing. It's just
right.
feelings, right?
Yeah,
They're neither good nor bad. They just are,
yeah.
right? So what we have to do is sort of like really dig into what is this guilt? Where is this coming from?
Mm,
Where did you create this concept of guilt? What is it you feel guilty for, et cetera? Right? Really just kind of digging into it and being willing to endure the discomfort of encountering those things about ourselves that we most dislike.
mhm,
I have to be willing to admit there are aspects of myself I simply do not like, and I have to stop hiding from them. And I have to be willing to embrace them and understand I may not like them, but it's me. It's still part of me, right? And I have to integrate it. If I can't integrate my shadow into myself, I can't become an individuated person. I have to be one with my shadow, right? And guilt is part of my shadow.